Lieutenant Colonel George Monro was a Scottish-Irish soldier. He was an officer in the British Army best remembered for his resolute but ultimately unsuccessful defence of Fort William Henry in 1757 during the 7 Years' War, French and Indian War, and the subsequent massacre of his garrison at the hands of France's Indian allies. These events were made famous by James Fenimore Cooper in his novel The Last of the Mohicans. Early life. Monro was born in Clonfin, County Longford, Ireland, to a Scottish military family in about 1700. His father was Colonel George Monro of Auchenbowie, who was famed for his victory at the Battle of Dunkeld in 1689. His mother was Margaret Bruce from Scotland. George also had an older brother named Alexander and a sister called Margaret. George's grandfather was Sir Alexander Monro of Bearcrofts. Monro joined Otway's regiment, the 35th Regiment of Foot, as a lieutenant in 1718. He appears to have had an unremarkable military career. By 1750, he had been promoted to the rank of lieutenant colonel. 7 Years' War. In 1757, with hostilities renewed between Britain and France, Monro was placed in command of Fort William Henry with 1,500 troops. That summer the siege of Fort William Henry took place, where he was attacked by a French force and their Indian allies, totaling about 8,000 men, under the command of the Marquis de Montcalm, effectively cut off from the main British force, commanded by General Daniel Webb. The small British garrison stood little chance once the siege started in earnest on the 3rd of August. Monro was forced to open negotiations with Montcalm on the 9th of August. Monro's tenacious defense won him generous terms, with the Articles of Surrender referring to the garrison's honorable defense, and Monro was able to negotiate for his troops to be allowed safe passage to Fort Edward, about 17 miles away. However, it was not to be. As Monro led his garrison from Fort William Henry, Montcalm's Indian allies attacked without order from Montcalm, leaving approximately 185 dead. Monro actually survived the massacre, but died suddenly just 3 months later, on the 3rd of November 1757, at Albany. In popular culture, Monro is portrayed as Colonel Monro in James Fenimore Cooper's story The Last of the Mohicans, in which he is the father of 2 daughters, Alice and Cora. In the story, he plays a similar role as he did in history, leading the defense of Fort William Henry. In the 1992 film adaptation, he is portrayed by Scottish actor Maurice Roves, in which he is portrayed as being killed in the massacre by Montcalm's Indian allies, the leader of whom cuts his heart out as revenge for Monro killing his family. Monro is also portrayed as a supporting character in the 2014 action-adventure video game Assassin's Creed Rogue. He is shown to be a noble character, seeking to help the people of New York City recover from the gang violence and the disrepair of the city. He is a member of the Templar Order and assists the protagonist Shay Cormac until he is killed by assassin Liam O'Brien in Albany after the fall of Fort William Henry. He is voiced by Graham Cuthbertson.